My name is Anna. I work in an office. I'm 30 years old, and my husband James and I are almost married. He said, "Get out of this house right now if you don't want a divorce." I was shocked because he seemed absolutely certain that I wouldn't want to divorce him if he said something like that. My father-in-law passed away a while ago, and my mother-in-law lives off the money he left behind. As we celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary, she keeps asking when we'll have grandchildren, which stresses me out a lot. Her persistent pressure to have grandchildren is really getting to me, possibly even making me feel anxious. I used to really like James for being so kind when we were dating, but after we got married, he changed a lot. He didn't even ask me. He just decided that we would live close to his parents' house practically every day when he's not at work. James doesn't do anything to help, even though he knows how stressed I am. He's been taking his mom's side and blaming me for our issues. He wants me to work at his parents' house all day without taking breaks, and when I work at my in-laws' house, they frequently go out or watch TV together. In the past, I was reprimanded for using a Hoover too loudly, so they told me to use a broom and rag instead. After that, my sister-in-law moved back in. She used to live nearby. However, she had some issues and had to return, which made things even more difficult for me. She has a 4-year-old daughter and wants me to prepare her lunch every day. When I say I can't because of my work, my mother-in-law becomes irate and says, "Your sister-in-law is going through a divorce." My husband says, "Can't you help the family?" My sister-in-law responds that it will be good practice for when you have your own child, therefore I get up at 4 in the morning. The difficult routine I'm stuck in is making my nieces lunch and breakfast for my in-laws every morning, then returning home to finish my chores and leave for work. My husband doesn't help with anything at home, so the only time I get to relax is during my work breaks. One day, though, he dropped a bombshell on me. "Should resign from your position." I discussed it with my mother and sister, and you know she's struggling. "I don't understand," so I said. He yelled at me and went to take a bath. I didn't understand why my sister-in-law's divorce meant I should resign from my position because my husband works at a low-paying job, and there are times when I make more money than he does. Does he really believe we can survive on his salary alone? I don't understand why my mother-in-law and sister-in-law can't handle the housework. I felt like I couldn't take it any longer. I took my car keys and drove to my childhood home, which is a little far from where we currently reside. Since my parents had moved abroad, the house was empty, and I couldn't bring myself to talk to them about what was going on. This is why I come here whenever things get tough. I'll be working from here for a while, and no, I won't go to your parents' house either. I just came home feeling happy. This place is full of happy memories from when I was lost and bought my frame. Hey, you're gone. After I got out of the bath, are you at your parents' place again? Yes, please stop going there every time something goes wrong. His words didn't make sense to me. After feeling defeated, I returned home and quit my job in the fashion industry. My coworkers assumed I was pregnant, but they were unaware of the true situation. I never had any free time because I had to take care of the house all day long, even when I had a high fever and a bad cold. To be honest, I felt like a servant in this home, but one day, my sister-in-law isn't exactly what you would call beautiful, and her personality isn't the best. But hey, everyone has different tastes, and there are all kinds of people out there. That's why the whole family was excited when something unexpected happened. She was getting married again, and her fiancé was a high-ranking executive at a large company earning a lot of money. Speaking about her marriage to a wealthy man, my sister-in-law proudly showed me a picture of him. As I stared at the picture, my husband said something unbelievable. "Because of this, Anna, your parents' house will become my sister's family place. Hold on, that house was left to me by my parents. It's not up to you to decide. The whole family has decided you who depends on my money don't get it." Say, this was my husband. My father built that house for me and my future children. James should understand this. So why is he being so self-centered? My heart couldn't take it any longer. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law said, "You can't even give us a grandchild. Can't you do something useful around the house for once?" After packing a few things and making the firm decision that I wasn't going back, I went to my parents' house. A few days later, when I didn't hear from my husband, I assumed he had changed his mind. But then the doorbell rang and I asked, "What are you doing here?" We decided to look around, but my sister-in-law pushed past me in spite of my protests. My sister-in-law said, "This house is pretty nice, but for you, Anna, when are you moving out?" My husband asked, unchanged, "Get your act together because my sister's wedding is coming up soon." I remained silent, and he added, "If you don't want a divorce, leave now." My husband was certain that I wouldn't divorce him, and he smiled alongside me. After I confirmed that my sister-in-law had received it, my husband appeared happy and said that it was all he had wanted to hear. They are planning a family-only trip to celebrate my sister-in-law's wedding, which begins tomorrow, but I am obviously not invited. My husband told me to pack up and leave, and when they returned, they looked excited, so I gave myself a small bitter smile for 2 weeks. My phone had been ringing nonstop since the morning, and it was my husband, my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law. I couldn't stand it any longer, so I answered, "Hey, Anna, where are you?" I said, "Liar, you're not the flat or your parents' place, and what's this about a for sale sign on?" My husband yelled. That was going to be my line. "Let's talk to our lawyers from now on." I firmly said, "That's going to be my line," and hung up on him while he was still yelling. Family house, yeah, I put it up for sale. What, why? I asked myself after you all laughed. The house you're in now just seems so dirty. I like things to be clean. I'm divorcing you, don't mess with me. I didn't know much about selling houses, so I reached out to a friend of my father's who owns a real estate company. He helped me out and we made a good deal. In addition, the apartment we were living in was in my name because my husband couldn't pass the screening process and I didn't intend to stay there any longer, so I canceled the lease while they were away and sent all of my husband's belongings to his parents' house, with them covering the cost of delivery. Even after that, I continued to receive calls from my in-laws, which I ignored completely. I recorded all of the terrible messages they left on my voicemail. My lawyer claims that my husband was hesitant to get a divorce, even though he claimed to want one, because he didn't want to lose his maid, which I believed would be a difficult battle, but all of a sudden my husband consented to the divorce. According to my lawyer, people showed up at his office stating that they wanted to divorce me as soon as possible. My husband had been hesitant about the divorce, but my mother-in-law persuaded him that since my sister-in-law's new husband was wealthy, they could replace me with a younger wife and hire a new housekeeper with money. After hearing this, my husband consented to the divorce and offered a small settlement if I agreed to stop bothering them. I assumed that was my line, but I accepted their offer shortly after my sister-in-law remarried, and after that, things were quiet for a while. After that, taking care of myself was much easier than I had anticipated, and I wish I had divorced sooner. I was just beginning to get used to my new life when my in-laws unexpectedly showed up at my door. As soon as I opened it, they rushed in, and my ex-husband insisted that we have a conversation. I grudgingly sat down, feeling confused, and he said, "Come back home, we forgive you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so Their eyes widened as if to say, "How do you know about that?" And they stared at me. "What do you know?" I decided to tell him the truth because I didn't know your sister loved hamburgers so much, and I didn't know her husband wasn't an executive at a large corporation. Even worse, he stole her family's money. "What are you doing? You've brought us such bad luck, daughter-in-law." She looked like she was going to attack me. When I was single, I used to go to different burger places with my friend. At one of them, a guy kept making mistakes with orders and getting yelled at. It turned out that he was your sister's husband. When I started dating my husband, he said no more hamburgers, so I stopped. Hearing this, my sister-in-law froze speechless. "I'm sorry for your loss," the previously silent one. "I recognized him from a picture your sister showed me, but I didn't want to get in the way when I showed her the burger joint's website for proof." She looked at her husband's picture there, by the way, but he wasn't there anymore. He probably left town. That sounds like marriage fraud, doesn't it? The mother-in-law said, "You knew and you didn't tell us that we took care of you who couldn't even have children for years. You owe us." I decided to come clean about my unfounded accusations because, first of all, I'm not the reason we couldn't have children. Perhaps my ex-husband could tell you more. The mother-in-law looked at her son in disbelief, and he guiltily avoided making eye contact. After we got married, the mother-in-law insisted that we get tested because we couldn't conceive. It turned out that I wasn't the problem, but my husband had a very low sperm count, which the doctor said was the reason we couldn't have children. When the mother-in-law inquired about the test results, my husband immediately lied and said I was the issue. I was frustrated, but they just kept saying things like, "You have to support your husband," and refused to acknowledge the reality. My ex-husband and my mother-in-law worked together to blame me for everything, but eventually he acknowledged that I was mistaken. "Okay, I was wrong," he said, "because when the house sells, we'll get a good amount of money, right? Let's all live happily as a family again." By the end of the day, my mother-in-law added, I realized that they most likely came here today to steal my money. What a disgusting bunch. There's no way I'm going to get back together with you, and I don't consider any of you family. When my ex-husband heard this, he snapped back, feeling a little too confident. Hey, I know you don't have much savings, even if he had apparently snooped into my bank account when I was single, and now he had this smug expression on his face as though to make fun of my predicament. The three of them were grinning at me, so I chose to be honest with them. Sure, I don't have much money saved up, as I told you, but in reality, I've put my money into stocks enough to live on without a job for a few years. At least they seemed shocked to hear this. My dad has been investing wisely in stocks since I was a child, and I learned from him and made some good investments of my own. The money that enabled my parents to relocate abroad came from those profitable investments, which I never shared with my greedy exam because I could see how disappointed they were. Faces I told them they could leave, but then I recalled a clause in our divorce agreement that stated that if we met without a valid reason, one of us would have to pay a penalty. I'd also threatened to call the police if they didn't leave, which scared them away, and they quickly left. I immediately called my lawyer and was instructed to notify him if they attempted to return as planned after learning I had money. When my ex-husband began pleading with me to get back together, he sent me messages with old pictures and strange things like, I'm here thinking about the good times. It was annoying, but I kept the messages as evidence. I was curious about how he could text me all day and still work, but I didn't really care. When he started to bother my friends, I had enough and told him that if he continued, I would call the police. I thanked my lawyer, and he told me something shocking. My ex-husband had a plan to rely on his sister's new husband for money. He even quit his job when she got remarried. It was very foolish of him to leave a good job at a good company. I sent him a picture of our divorce agreement at the closest police station, and he stopped messaging me. I never heard from him again. After we got married, I noticed that some of my favorite things were gradually going missing. First, it was a necklace I had purchased when I was single. Then it was a fountain pen my parents gave me when I started working, bags, rings, and other items. I told my lawyer that I had also asked another lawyer for help with a different issue. When I confronted my husband about the missing items, he simply yelled at me to stop worrying, which made me even more suspicious. I installed a camera in our closet without telling him, and what I saw shocked my husband and mother-in-law as they went through my belongings and appeared happy with themselves. In particular, the fountain pen, which meant a lot to me, disappeared one by one. My sister-in-law moved back in, and the camera captured 3 of them rather than 2. They took advantage of my silence and continued to sell my belongings for cash. They likely saw the amount in my bank account and believed they could get away with it. This continued until our divorce, and I gathered a lot of evidence when they believed I wouldn't do anything. My sister-in-law's ex-husband learned about the incident and took custody of their daughter because my sister-in-law didn't seem to care much for her daughter. I was relieved to see them recently because I sued them for damages and emotional distress caused by their actions. They're probably freaking out now that they brought it on themselves. My husband was too proud to find another job and ended up pleading with his former employer for his job back, but the daughter and her ex-husband were happy shopping together, holding hands, and she had a genuine smile that I rarely saw when she was with my in-laws. The 3 of them wanted to live comfortably and try to get welfare, but were turned down because they were healthy. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law had to pay me compensation, so they both started working part-time at a nearby supermarket. However, because they weren't used to working, they struggled with their new jobs ever since they started working there. We were happy that he had quit and called the police when he wouldn't leave. Now, he has to take day labor jobs to make ends meet. Although the hidden camera from my marriage is still in place, supermarket sales have drastically decreased, and they have earned the moniker, the plague-bringing mother and daughter. It turns out that they were renting rather than owning the house they lived in, as I had assumed, and when they were unable to pay the rent, they moved to a dilapidated flat that has a reputation for being pretty awful. They seem to be constantly fighting and barely making ends meet. The police had to come the other day because their fights were so loud. As for me, I sold the house with their assistance and used the proceeds to launch a new clothing business with a coworker from my previous job. Lately, we've been gaining more clients and even being featured in magazines and on TV. My job is the best thing ever again, and there's even better news. I met a man at work, and we're getting married. His family is very kind to me and has treated me like one of their own, and we're expecting a baby, which makes me the happiest I've ever been.